My name is Amanda Wilson, and at 32 years old, I never expected to see my parents again. As third daughter to traditional South Asian immigrants in America, my birth was their final disappointment. When I refused an arranged marriage at 22, they disowned me completely. For 10 years, silence. Then my maternal grandmother left me an unexpected inheritance, and suddenly my parents reappeared. Their demands for my fortune came with manipulation, but my response changed everything. If you are watching this now, please subscribe and let me know where you are viewing from. Your support means the world to me. Growing up as the third daughter in a traditional South Asian family in America shaped every aspect of my identity. My father, Raj, had immigrated from India in the early 1980s with dreams of business success and a proper family. He worked 16-hour days at first, saving every penny to bring my mother, Nita, to join him. Their marriage had been arranged by their families back in India, and my mother followed my father to America with hopes of a better life. My father struggled to establish his small electronics store in our suburban community. He faced discrimination, language barriers, and financial setbacks. With each challenge, his determination to have a son who would carry on the family name and business grew stronger. It became an obsession that overshadowed everything else. I had two older sisters, Sophia and Diane. They were born 4 and 2 years before me, respectively. Each time my mother announced her pregnancy, my father celebrated with the community, confident that this time he would have his son, and each time the birth of a daughter left him visibly disappointed. My sisters tried desperately to please him, excelling in school, helping in the store, learning traditional cooking and customs. But no achievement could overcome the fundamental disappointment of their gender. When my mother became pregnant with me, my father was convinced the third time would be the charm. He even painted the nursery blue and bought tiny cricket equipment. The day I was born, the nurse told me years later my father didn't even want to hold me. I was the final disappointment, as he would sometimes call me when angry. After my birth, my mother was pressured by my father and his family to try again for a son, but medical complications made that impossible. Family gatherings were always painful reminders of this gender hierarchy. My male cousins received lavish gifts, constant praise, and were given freedom to pursue their interests. Meanwhile, my sisters and I received practical items, criticism disguised as concern, and strict limitations on our activities. When my cousin Raj Jr. got a computer for his 10th birthday, I asked for one too. My father laughed and said, "What does a girl need a computer for? Learn to cook like your mother instead." Despite the lack of support, I excelled academically. Learning became my escape and my rebellion. When I brought home straight, as on my report card, my mother would smile secretly, but my father would merely nod and ask why I wasn't helping more with housework. My teachers recognized my potential and encouraged me, becoming the supportive adults I lacked at home. The only family member who truly believed in me was my maternal grandmother, Irene. She had reluctantly accepted her daughter's arranged marriage, but had never fully embraced the traditional gender roles that came with it. On her visits from New Jersey, she would bring me books about strong women throughout history and whisper encouragement when no one was listening. "You are meant for more than what they see," she would tell me. "Learn everything you can. Education is the one thing no one can take from you." The clash between my American upbringing and my family's traditional expectations created constant tension. At school, I saw girls planning careers as doctors, engineers, and business leaders. At home, the conversations centered around which family would provide a suitable husband when the time came. My classmates had posters of music stars on their walls. I had to hide mine under my mattress. By 14, I began showing signs of the independent spirit that would eventually lead to my estrangement. I joined a debate club against my father's wishes. I started asking questions at family gatherings about why the women ate after the men. I befriended American girls whose parents treated them as equals to their brothers. My sister Sophia tried to warn me, Just play along, she would advise. It is easier if you just smile and nod than do what you want quietly. Diane was more direct. You are going to get yourself thrown out if you keep challenging them. By the time I finished high school, the battle lines were clearly drawn. I had been accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship. My father expected me to live at home and attend community college, studying something suitable until marriage. The fight lasted all summer with my mother caught in between, sometimes pleading with me to comply, sometimes secretly encouraging me to pursue my dreams. In the end, it was my grandmother who made it possible. She arrived unannounced one August afternoon with an envelope containing enough money for my first semester's room and board. Tell them you received additional scholarship money, she instructed, and call me every Sunday. The day I left for college, my father barely spoke to me. My mother hugged me tightly when he wasn't looking and slipped extra cash into my bag. I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror as I drove away, tears streaming down my face but with determination in my eyes. I was 18 years old and had no idea that I was driving toward both my greatest pain and my ultimate freedom. College opened up a world I had only glimpsed from afar. At State University, I found myself surrounded by people who judged me based on my ideas rather than my gender. My roommate Tara found it bizarre when I asked permission to join the business club. "Why would you need permission?" she laughed. "You are an adult." I had chosen to study business management despite my parents wanting me to pursue nursing, which they considered a more appropriate field for women. "Business is for men," my father had said dismissively. "You will just waste your education when you get married anyway." But business fascinated me, particularly marketing and entrepreneurship. I thrived in my classes, earning the respect of professors who became important mentors. To support myself beyond the modest help from my grandmother, I juggled part-time jobs at the campus bookstore and as a research assistant for the marketing department. Every dollar I earned represented independence, and I saved carefully while watching other students spend freely with their parents' credit cards. It was through the research position that I met Jessica, a senior who took me under her wing. Smart, confident, and from a family that celebrated her ambitions, she represented everything I wanted to become. "Your family is crazy," she declared after hearing snippets of my background. "You know that, right? Like clinically insane to not be proud of you." Jessica introduced me to her friend group, a diverse circle of ambitious women who supported each other's goals without competition. They became the first chosen family I had ever experienced, accepting me completely and encouraging my growth. When I hesitated to apply for competitive internships, they edited my resume. When I doubted my abilities, they reminded me of my strengths. With them, I began to unlearn the limitations I had internalized. Throughout these transformative years, my grandmother remained my connection to family. I visited her during shorter breaks when returning to my parents' home would be too difficult. In her small apartment filled with books and plants, I could breathe freely and share my true experiences. "Your mother was different before marriage," she told me during one such visit. "She wanted to be a teacher. She had spark just like you." These glimpses into my mother's lost dreams only strengthened my resolve to forge my own path. In my junior year, I met Michael, a kind engineering student who treated me with a respect I had never received from men in my community. Our relationship developed slowly, built on friendship and mutual admiration. When he asked about meeting my family, I changed the subject. The worlds could not collide without casualties. I maintained minimal contact with my parents, calling once a week and visiting on major holidays. These interactions were strained, filled with subtle criticisms and expectations. My father repeatedly mentioned daughters of family friends who had married well and settled into proper family life. My mother asked increasingly direct questions about whether I was meeting nice Indian boys at college. The breaking point arrived unexpectedly during the spring semester of my junior year. My parents appeared unannounced at my dormitory one Saturday morning. I was shocked to see them standing awkwardly in the lobby, my father in a formal suit, my mother in a traditional salwar kameez, both looking out of place among the students in casual weekend attire. "We need to talk," my father said, without greeting. "There is someone you should meet." They had brought along Vikram, the son of my father's business associate. 30 years old, recently divorced, and established in his career, he was looking for a traditional wife to start a family. My parents had already discussed the potential arrangement with his family. They presented it as a finished deal, requiring only my compliance. We sat in the stiff formality of a campus coffee shop, Vikram, examining me like merchandise while my parents listed his qualifications. Good family, successful accounting practice, nice home in an upscale neighborhood. I sat in stunned silence, watching 21 years of personal growth and American education dismissed in an instant. "I am not interested," I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I am finishing my degree and pursuing my career. Marriage is not in my plans right now, and when it is, I will choose my own partner." My father's face darkened with anger. "This is not about what you want," he hissed, keeping his voice low but intense. "This is about family duty. We have found you a good match, better than you deserve with your stubborn attitude. You will finish this semester, then marry before fall." "No," I said simply. "I will not." The argument escalated quickly. My father threatened to cut off the limited financial support they still provided. My mother cried quietly, pleading with me to be reasonable, to think about my future security. Vikram excused himself awkwardly, saying he could see I needed time to adjust to the idea. When they finally left, I returned to my dorm room and collapsed. Tara found me there hours later, still in shock. "They cannot actually force you to marry someone," she insisted, her American upbringing making such concepts seem impossible. But I knew the powerful forces of family obligation, community pressure, and cultural guilt. Over the next weeks, the pressure intensified. Daily phone calls, emotional manipulation, family friends reaching out to reason with me. My father gave me an ultimatum: agree to the marriage or be cut off completely financially and emotionally. I sought help from the university's counseling center, where a therapist helped me navigate this impossible choice. "Your life belongs to you," she reminded me in each session. "Family relationships should be built on love, not control." As finals approached, I made my decision. I would finish my degree no matter the cost. I would not sacrifice my future to satisfy outdated traditions. The choice felt both terrifying and inevitable, like stepping off a cliff with the faith that I would either fly or learn to survive the fall. Graduation day arrived under a perfect blue sky, the kind of spring day that promises new beginnings. Rows of folding chairs filled the university quad, proud families clutching cameras and bouquets. Among them, my grandmother sat alone, wearing her best dress and a determined smile. My parents had refused to attend after our final confrontation. That confrontation had come 2 weeks earlier, when I returned home to collect my remaining belongings. I had secured a marketing assistant position in Chicago starting the week after graduation. When I announced this to my parents, my father erupted. "So, this is your choice, to abandon your family, your culture, your responsibility, for some job typing emails for Americans?" "I am not abandoning anything," I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I am building a life based on my values and abilities. I would love to have your blessing, but I will go without it if necessary." "If you leave this house for this job, you are no longer our daughter," he declared, my mother sobbing silently beside him. "No one will marry you once you live alone in another city. You bring shame to our family name." I looked at my mother, hoping for some support, but she turned away. Years of conditioning had left her unable to contradict my father, even to defend her daughter. I packed my things that night with shaking hands, ignoring the emotional storm around me. My sisters watched from doorways, Sophia with resigned sadness, Diane with a hint of admiration she quickly concealed. After graduation, I hugged my grandmother fiercely. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "Remember who you are even when it is difficult." Her support was the lifeline I clung to as I drove to Chicago with everything I owned packed into my used Honda Civic. My first apartment was a tiny studio in a questionable neighborhood, shared with two other recent graduates to make the rent manageable. Julia worked in graphic design, and Katie was starting medical school. Both came from supportive families who called regularly and sent care packages. I never explained why mine did not. The marketing assistant position paid $29,000 annually, barely enough to cover my share of rent, student loan payments, and basic necessities. I worked 60-hour weeks, saying yes to every assignment, volunteering for projects no one else wanted. My supervisor, Brian, noticed my dedication, but also my exhaustion. "You work like someone is chasing you," he commented one evening as I stayed late to finish a presentation. "The company is not going anywhere, Amanda. The work will be here tomorrow." But I could not afford to slow down. Failure meant proving my parents right. Success was my only option, fueled by a determination born of rejection. The emotional toll of family estrangement emerged in unexpected moments. When coworkers complained about overbearing parents, I would quietly leave the room. Holidays became exercises in distraction, accepting invitations from acquaintances to avoid being alone with my thoughts. My first Thanksgiving in Chicago was spent at Julia's family dinner, where her mother kept insisting I take leftovers because I looked too thin. At night, alone in my shared apartment, the weight of my isolation would sometimes become unbearable. I started seeing a therapist again, using the limited mental health coverage from my company insurance. Dr. Lisa Taylor specialized in family trauma and cultural identity conflicts. "What you are experiencing is grief," she explained during one session. "Even when separating from family is necessary for your well-being, it still represents a profound loss." Through therapy, I began to process the complex emotions: anger at the unfairness, guilt over causing pain to my mother, fear of having made the wrong choice, and grief for the loving family I had always wanted but never had. Dr. Taylor helped me understand that maintaining boundaries was not the same as causing harm, that my parents' reactions were their responsibility, not mine. My grandmother remained my only family connection. Our Sunday phone calls were sacred ritual. She never pressured me to reconcile, but kept me informed about my sisters. Sophia had given in to family expectations, agreeing to an arranged marriage with Aaron, a doctor from a family my father approved of. Diane was finishing her degree in nursing, still living at home, and walking the tightrope of partial compliance with tradition. When my grandmother mentioned me to my parents, they would change the subject immediately. In our community, I had become a cautionary tale, the daughter who chose American individualism over family duty. According to community gossip that reached my grandmother, my father claimed I had been corrupted by Western values and bad influences. Dating proved complicated in this new phase of my life. Trust came difficultly after family betrayal. I went on occasional dates, but kept potential partners at a distance, afraid to reveal the messy reality of my background. When relationships began to deepen, I would find reasons to end them, protecting myself from potential rejection, once they learned my family had deemed me unworthy. Despite these personal struggles, my career gradually gained momentum. After 18 months of relentless work, I received my first promotion to junior marketing coordinator with a modest salary increase. I moved to a slightly better apartment with only one roommate. I purchased professional clothes instead of relying on thrift store finds. Small victories that I celebrated alone, taking myself to dinner at an actual restaurant instead of eating instant noodles at my desk. One night, I called my parents home, something I did every few months despite their continued rejection. My mother answered, and for a brief moment her voice softened with recognition. Then my father took the phone. "We have no daughter by that name," he said coldly before hanging up. I sat in my darkened apartment, phone still in hand, and made a decision. I would stop seeking approval from those who could not give it. I would build a life so fulfilling that their absence, while still painful, would not define me. I would find my worth not in their acceptance but in my own accomplishments and the new connections I would form. The path forward was unclear, but for the first time since leaving home, it felt like mine to choose. 3 years after graduation, life had developed a rhythm I could finally call satisfying. My promotion to marketing manager at Horizon Media came with a salary of $54,000 annually, enough to afford a small one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. The space was mine alone, decorated with colorful artwork and filled with books, a physical manifestation of my growing independence. My professional reputation had solidified through consistent performance and creative thinking. The marketing team valued my perspective, particularly my ability to reach diverse audiences that our predominantly white male leadership often overlooked. When our agency pitched to new clients, I was increasingly included in presentations, my youth and background now assets rather than liabilities. Linda Stevens, the vice president of client relations, had taken particular interest in my career. In her 50s, with a successful track record and no patience for office politics, she became the mentor I desperately needed. "You have raw talent," she told me bluntly during our first official mentoring session. "But you also have a chip on your shoulder the size of Texas. Channel that fire more strategically and you could run this place someday." Under her guidance, I learned to navigate corporate dynamics, to speak with authority in meetings, and to negotiate for what I deserved rather than accepting whatever was offered. When she discovered I had been working weekends without compensation, she marched into the creative director's office and emerged with approval for my proposal to restructure the junior team workflows. "Never let them take advantage of your willingness to work hard," she advised. "That just teaches them your dedication is free." The real turning point came when our agency competed for the Meridian Tech account, a startup with innovative products but struggling to connect with female consumers. Their previous marketing had been created entirely by men, resulting in campaigns that ranged from mildly tone-deaf to outright offensive. During internal brainstorming, I pitched a radical approach: authentic storytelling, focused on how their products actually fit into women's lives, featuring real users instead of models. The creative director hesitated, but Linda backed my concept. "Let Amanda lead this one," she suggested. "If we want to win a client that needs to reach women, maybe we should have a woman shape the strategy." My campaign concept, "Technology That Sees You," resonated immediately with Meridian's new female CEO. We won the account, bringing $5 million in billings to our agency. My role in securing the client earned me agency-wide recognition and an industry award for emerging talent. During this career acceleration, my friendship with Jessica had evolved into a business partnership. After reconnecting at an industry conference, we began discussing the gaps we both saw in digital marketing for women-owned businesses. What started as weekend strategy sessions at coffee shops grew into a viable side business, Wilson Hart Digital, offering specialized marketing services to female entrepreneurs. "We should go full-time with this," Jessica suggested as our client list expanded. "There is a real market need and we would be our own bosses." The prospect was both exciting and terrifying. I had worked so hard for stability, and entrepreneurship meant embracing uncertainty again. But the freedom to create something truly mine, something that reflected my values, proved irresistible. While my professional life flourished, my personal life developed more slowly. My grandmother's health began declining, requiring more frequent visits to her assisted living facility in New Jersey. These trips became sacred time opportunities to absorb her wisdom and strength before it was too late. "I saved everything I could for you girls," she confided during one visit, holding my hand with surprising strength. "Your mother knows nothing about it. I made sure it would be yours no matter what happened." I assumed she meant small, sentimental items, or perhaps a modest savings account. My grandmother had lived comfortably, but not extravagantly, on my grandfather's pension and her own teacher's retirement. I assured her that her love and support were the only inheritance I needed. Between work commitments and visits to my grandmother, dating remained sporadic until I met Thomas Barrett at a business networking event. A software entrepreneur who had successfully sold his first company, he approached business and relationships with the same straightforward honesty. "I noticed you deflect personal questions," he observed on our third date. "I respect privacy, but I would like to actually know you, not just the carefully edited version you present." Something about his directness broke through my practiced defenses. Over dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant, I shared the full story of my family estrangement, expecting the usual awkward sympathy or subtle withdrawal. Instead, he listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and then reached for my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he said simply. "It explains a lot about your determination. For what it is worth, their loss is immeasurable." Our relationship developed with an honesty I had never experienced before. Thomas understood ambition and drive, having built his company from nothing. He supported my growing business partnership with Jessica without feeling threatened by my success. For the first time, I could imagine a future that included both career fulfillment and personal partnership. As Wilson Hart Digital gained clients, the decision timeline for leaving my corporate position accelerated. Linda advised caution, but supported my entrepreneurial ambitions. "Build your lifeboat properly before you jump ship," she warned. "But when you are ready, jump with both feet." The decision became clearer when my grandmother's health took a serious downturn. The doctors diagnosed advanced heart failure, giving her months rather than years. I took a leave of absence from Horizon to spend time with her, using the opportunity to seriously evaluate my next steps. During those precious final weeks, my grandmother and I had the deepest conversations of our relationship. She shared stories of her own struggles against family expectations, her regrets about not standing up for my mother when she abandoned her teaching aspirations, and her pride in my refusal to compromise my authentic self. "You remind me of who I could have been with more courage," she told me one afternoon as we looked through old photographs. "Promise me you will never shrink yourself to make others comfortable." I made that promise without hesitation, not knowing how soon and how profoundly it would be tested. My grandmother passed away peacefully on a Sunday morning in October, her hand in mine as she took her final breaths. The loss felt like a physical wound, a tearing away of the one person who had loved me unconditionally throughout my life. For days afterward, I moved through necessary arrangements in a fog of grief, supported by Thomas and Jessica, who handled practical matters when I could not. The funeral service was small but dignified, held in the chapel of my grandmother's Presbyterian church. I arrived early to have quiet moments alone before others arrived. As the service time approached, I watched the small sanctuary fill with my grandmother's friends, former colleagues, and neighbors. Then, just before the minister began, the door opened to reveal my parents and sisters. My father looked older, his hair now more gray than black. My mother seemed smaller, somehow diminished by the years. Sophia arrived with her husband and a toddler. I had never met my nephew, who did not know I existed. Diane came alone, her eyes finding mine immediately, with a mix of sorrow and recognition. They sat in the back row, separate from me by choice and circumstance. Throughout the service, I could feel my father's disapproving gaze when I delivered a brief eulogy, celebrating my grandmother's strength and independence. No one from my family approached me afterward, maintaining the fiction that I was a stranger rather than flesh and blood. 3 days later, I received a call from Gregory Winston, my grandmother's attorney, requesting my presence at the reading of her will. I arrived at his office, expecting a brief formality, perhaps a few personal items left to remember her by. Instead, I found myself seated across from my parents and sisters in the conference room, the tension palpable, as we acknowledged each other with stiff nods. "Before we begin," Mr. Winston said, adjusting his glasses, Mrs. Irene Taylor was explicit about her wishes and her reasoning. "I ask that you all respect her decisions regardless of personal feelings." What followed left me speechless. My grandmother had amassed significant wealth through decades of careful investing in property acquisitions, assets she had kept private from the entire family. The majority of her estate, valued at just over $4 million, was left to me in an irrevocable trust with smaller provisions for my sisters. My parents received only nominal bequests and a letter whose contents were not disclosed. "This cannot be right," my father protested, face flushing with anger. "She was not in her right mind. We will contest this." "Mr. Taylor made her arrangements when she was of sound mind and body," the attorney replied calmly. "She anticipated your reaction and prepared extensive documentation of her competence. Contesting would be expensive and ultimately futile." My mother wept quietly while my father continued to object. Sophia looked stunned, while Diane showed a hint of satisfaction, quickly masked. I sat in shock, unable to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. The attorney handed me a personal letter from my grandmother, which I clutched without opening. As we left the office, my father brushed past me without speaking. My mother paused briefly, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in years, then followed him. Only Diane lingered. "She was proud of you," my sister whispered. We all knew it, and it made him furious. Before I could respond, she hurried after our parents. Alone in my hotel room that night, I finally opened my grandmother's letter. Her familiar handwriting covered several pages, explaining that she had watched her own daughter surrender her dreams to tradition and had vowed not to let the same happen to her granddaughters. She had invested her teacher's pension, aggressively purchased rental properties during market downturns, and lived modestly to build a legacy that would ensure my independence. "Use this freedom wisely," she wrote. "Create the life you were meant to live, not the one tradition prescribed for you. And perhaps someday help your sisters find their own paths to freedom." The inheritance transformed my business plans overnight. What had been a promising but undercapitalized startup became a fully funded enterprise. Jessica and I incorporated properly leased office space in downtown Chicago and hired our first employees. Wilson Hart Digital, specialized in helping women-owned businesses establish digital presence and marketing strategies, filling a niche that larger agencies overlooked. Within 18 months, our client roster expanded from local businesses to national brands seeking authentic connection with female consumers. We developed proprietary analytics tools specifically designed to track engagement patterns among diverse female demographics. Our approach attracted attention within the industry, leading to speaking engagements and profile pieces in marketing publications. Businessweek featured our company in an article titled "Marketing's New Wave" with a photo of Jessica and me on their digital cover. The piece highlighted our rapid growth and unique approach to authentic representation in advertising. The exposure brought larger clients and acquisition offers from established agencies, all of which we declined. "We are building something that matters," I explained to Thomas over dinner after turning down a particularly generous buyout proposal. "This is about more than money now." Thomas understood completely. His own company had been founded with similar values, prioritizing innovation over immediate profit. Our relationship had deepened throughout this period of professional success, providing emotional stability during tremendous change. When he proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, the decision felt natural and right. "You know my family situation," I reminded him as we discussed wedding plans. "It will just be my side of the church. We will fill it with the family we have chosen," he promised. "The people who actually show up for you." Our engagement announcement ran in the Chicago Tribune's Society section, a standard practice for Thomas's socially prominent family. I thought nothing of it until I received an email from a cousin still in contact with my parents, informing me that they had seen the notice. The knowledge that I was marrying into a wealthy, established family had apparently sparked discussions in the community about reconciliation. The first indirect contact came through family friends who happened to be visiting Chicago and suggested meeting for dinner. During the awkward meal, they casually mentioned that my father's business had struggled in recent years, facing competition from big box electronics stores. They noted how helpful connections to successful business people could be in such situations. I understood the message being conveyed but chose not to respond to the obvious fishing expedition. 2 weeks later, my sister Diane called directly, the first conversation we had had in years. "Things are bad at home," she admitted after initial pleasantries. "Dad's store is failing and they remortgaged the house to keep it afloat. Mom has had to take a job at the mall to make ends meet." While I sympathized with their difficulties, I questioned the timing of this sudden communication. "Why are you telling me this now, Diane? We have been estranged for years." Her hesitation spoke volumes. "They know about your company's success and your engagement. Dad would never admit it, but he has been following your career online. They are too proud to ask directly, but they need help." The conversation left me conflicted. Years of therapy had helped me establish boundaries and process my rejection, but the cultural and familial bonds remained powerful. I discussed the situation with Thomas and my therapist, trying to determine what, if any, obligation I had to people who had cut me out of their lives when I refused to conform to their expectations. Before I could reach a decision, the situation accelerated dramatically. My sister Sophia called in tears, explaining that our father had suffered a minor heart attack after another failed attempt to secure business financing. He was stable but facing medical bills on top of their existing financial troubles. "He would kill me for calling you," she admitted, "but I do not know where else to turn." As I hung up the phone, a notification appeared on my laptop screen. A new email had arrived from an address I had not seen in a decade, my father's. The subject line read, simply, "Family Matters." Inside was a formal request to meet during his recovery, with the clear implication that financial assistance would be discussed. The family that had disowned me for choosing independence was now seeking my help precisely because of the success that independence had created. The irony was not lost on me, nor was the potential for both healing and further harm in how I chose to respond. My father's email proposed meeting at our family home, framing the invitation as a long overdue reconciliation. After consulting with Thomas and my therapist, I suggested an alternative: my office in downtown Chicago. This was partly practical, as I could not take time away from the business, but also strategic. Meeting on my territory would set a different tone than returning to the home where I had been rejected. To my surprise, my parents agreed. On the appointed day, I arrived early, reviewing client proposals to calm my nerves, while Jessica arranged for lunch to be delivered. "I can stay if you want moral support," she offered, knowing the full history. "I need to handle this myself," I replied, though the offer tempted me, "but stay close by." At precisely noon, the receptionist announced their arrival. My parents stood awkwardly in the glass-walled lobby of Wilson Hart Digital, looking out of place among the modern furnishings and young staff. My father had aged visibly, his posture less commanding than I remembered. My mother's hair had gone completely gray, her traditional clothing hanging loosely on her thinner frame. "Welcome to Wilson Hart Digital." I greeted them formally, extending my hand as I would to any business visitor. My father hesitated before shaking it briefly. My mother moved as if to embrace me, then stopped herself, settling for a nod. I led them to my private office with its view of the Chicago skyline, watching their eyes widen at the obvious success surrounding them. Awards lined one wall, press coverage another. My desk displayed a photo of Thomas and me at a charity gala, looking happy and established. "Your company seems to be doing well," my father observed after declining offered refreshments. "The business magazines say you are worth millions now." The directness was typical of him, bypassing pleasantries for the true purpose of the visit. My mother looked uncomfortable with his approach, but remained silent as always. "Our company has been fortunate," I acknowledged, emphasizing the partnership with Jessica. "We identified an underserved market and built solutions to meet those needs." My father nodded, attempting to appear impressed rather than envious. "I always knew you were smart. Too smart sometimes, but smart." This backhanded compliment, typical of his approach, once would have hurt me deeply. Now I recognized it as his inability to fully acknowledge my achievements without maintaining his perceived superiority. After more awkward small talk, he finally addressed the purpose of their visit. Our family has been through difficult times, he began, voice softening, in what I recognized as his persuasive business tone. Perhaps we all said things we regret. Now we are older and wiser. Yes, family should come together in hard times. My mother finally spoke, her voice quavering. We miss you, Amanda. We have a grandson now, your nephew. He should know his aunt. The manipulation was so transparent it almost seemed naive. 10 years of silence broken not by genuine regret but by financial necessity. I asked directly about their situation, and my father reluctantly outlined their troubles. The business nearly bankrupted the house in foreclosure proceedings, medical bills mounting after his heart attack. How much do you need? I asked plainly. My father named a sum that would clear their debts and provide a comfortable retirement, $800,000. A loan, he clarified, though we both knew it would never be repaid. A family obligation. In our culture, successful children support their parents. In our culture, I repeated carefully. The same culture that dictated I should abandon my education for an arranged marriage. The same family obligation that led you to disown me when I chose my own path. My mother began to cry softly while my father's expression hardened. That was different. You were being stubborn and disrespectful. Now you are successful because of the values we instilled in you. I am successful despite being told repeatedly that my gender made me less valuable. I corrected him. I built this company after being told that business was not for women. I found happiness with a partner I chose after being told my only worth was in an arranged marriage to strengthen family connections. He dismissed my words with a wave. Ancient history. We are here now, family in need. Will you turn your back on the parents who raised you? The cultural guilt was a powerful weapon, one that had shaped my decisions for years before I left home. I felt its pull, even now, the ingrained belief that children owe unquestioning obedience and support regardless of how they have been treated. I need time to consider this request, I said finally. This is not a decision I can make impulsively. They left with reluctant acceptance of my non-answer, my father pressing his business card into my hand with the directive to call within the week. As the elevator doors closed behind them, I leaned against the wall, emotionally drained from the encounter. That evening I discussed the situation with Thomas over dinner at home. They showed no real remorse, I explained. No acknowledgement of the pain they caused. Just expectation that I would hand over money because of family obligation. Thomas listened thoughtfully before responding. What do you want from this situation? Not what do you feel obligated to do, but what outcome would bring you peace? His question made me realize I had been approaching the situation from the wrong angle, thinking only of their expectations rather than my own needs. After years of therapy, I understood that financial support without addressing the underlying relationship issues would solve nothing. It might temporarily alleviate their financial problems, but would leave the deeper wounds unhealed. That night, I called Dr. Taylor, my longtime therapist, for an emergency session. Healthy boundaries are not about punishment, she reminded me. They are about creating conditions where authentic relationship becomes possible. Over the next 3 days, I struggled with conflicting emotions, lingering desire for parental approval, anger at their manipulative approach, guilt over their genuine financial distress, and fear that any decision would leave me vulnerable to further pain. I consulted with my financial advisor about what I could reasonably provide without compromising my business or future security. By the time my father called again, pressing for an answer, I had developed a plan that honored both my cultural background and my personal boundaries. I scheduled another meeting this time, requesting that both my sisters attend as well. I have made a decision, I informed my father, but I would like to discuss it with the entire family present. He agreed reluctantly, likely, assuming that, including my sisters, would increase the pressure on me to comply with family expectations. What he did not anticipate was that I had already spoken with Diane, privately gauging her perspective and sharing my intentions. For this crucial meeting, I chose neutral territory, a private room at a respected law firm where Thomas's family had connections. I arrived with my attorney, financial advisor, and Thomas, whose presence my father had not expected. "This is a family matter," my father objected when introductions were made. "Why bring outsiders?" "Thomas is my future husband and family," I replied calmly. "And given the financial nature of your request, professional advisors seem appropriate." The dynamic shifted immediately. What my father had likely envisioned as an emotional family discussion, where cultural guilt could be leveraged, had become a formal business meeting. My sisters exchanged glances, sensing the change in atmosphere. When everyone was seated, I outlined my response to their request. Rather than simply writing a check, I had created a structured proposal. My attorney distributed folders containing the details to each family member. "I am prepared to establish a family foundation," I explained. "The Wilson Taylor Educational Fund will have an initial endowment of $500,000, with potential for additional funding based on specific conditions." The conditions were clearly enumerated: first, family therapy sessions to address the estrangement and establish healthier communication patterns. Second, a formal acknowledgement of the harm caused by my rejection and disownment. Third, the foundation would primarily support educational opportunities for young women from traditional backgrounds, seeking independence, with a portion allocated to family needs based on documented financial planning. "This is insulting," my father interrupted, face flushing with anger. "We are your parents, not charity cases or business problems to solve." "This is not charity," I corrected him. "This is establishing a foundation for healing both our family and others who face similar cultural conflicts. The financial support comes with the emotional work required for true reconciliation." My mother, typically silent in family confrontations, surprised everyone by speaking up. "Raj, listen to what she is offering. Not just money, but a chance to be family again." My father stood abruptly, declaring the proposal unacceptable. "You wish to humiliate us, to make us beg and attend therapy, like there is something wrong with upholding our traditions. This is American disrespect disguised as help." As he moved to leave, Sophia spoke for the first time. "Dad, stop. Amanda is right." The room fell silent at this unprecedented challenge. My eldest sister, who had always been the most compliant with family expectations, continued with growing confidence. "We lost Amanda because of pride and rigid traditions. Now we might lose everything else the same way. I want my son to know his aunt. I want us to be whole again. If that requires therapy and acknowledgement of mistakes, then that is what we should do." The family power dynamic visibly shifted in that moment. My father stood frozen between his pride and the recognition that his traditional authority was no longer absolute. My mother moved to stand beside Sophia, placing a hand on her arm in silent support. The confrontation that followed was both painful and cathartic. Years of unspoken resentments finally voiced. My father eventually stormed out, unwilling to bend. My mother, in a rare act of independence, remained behind with my sisters. "He may never change," she admitted tearfully, "but I have lost too much already by following without question. Whatever happens with him, I want to know my daughter again." In that law firm conference room, surrounded by legal documents and financial projections, the first tentative steps toward genuine family healing began. Not through unconditional financial rescue, but through establishing boundaries that honored both my cultural heritage and my hard-won personal autonomy. The weeks following the confrontation brought unexpected developments. My father maintained his angry rejection of my terms, but my mother began calling regularly for the first time in a decade. Our conversations started awkwardly, years of separation, creating uncertainty about even the most basic topics. Gradually, we established a cautious rhythm, sharing small details of our lives while carefully avoiding triggering subjects. "Your father is stubborn, not evil," she explained during one call. "He believes he was protecting you from American corruption. In his mind, arranging a good marriage was his duty as a father." "I understand his intentions," I acknowledged. "But good intentions do not justify controlling another person's life choices." My sister Sophia invited me to meet my nephew, 5-year-old Arjun, a bright, curious child who knew nothing of family conflicts. During that first visit to her suburban home, I watched her navigate the complex balance of honoring cultural traditions while creating space for her son's American identity. She had made different choices than mine, but I recognized that she too was defining her own path within the constraints of our upbringing. Diane proved the biggest surprise. After our reconnection, she confided that she had secretly completed pre-law courses and had been accepted to law school, something she had hidden from our parents. "Watching you succeed gave me courage," she admitted. "I just needed longer to find my way." 3 therapy sessions had occurred with my mother and sisters, facilitated by a counselor specializing in cross-cultural family dynamics. My father refused to attend but did not prevent my mother from participating, a small but significant shift from his previous absolute control. The family foundation was established with the agreed-upon initial funding. The first scholarships would support young women from immigrant backgrounds pursuing business and law degrees. My mother joined the selection committee, her perspective on balancing tradition and opportunity proving valuable in evaluating applications. Throughout these developments, Thomas remained my steadfast support, never pushing for faster reconciliation, but affirming my boundaries when guilt threatened to override them. Our wedding plans progressed with careful consideration of how to honor multiple traditions without compromising my hard-won autonomy. 6 months after our confrontation, the situation reached a turning point. My father suffered another health setback more serious than the first. During his hospitalization, I visited despite our unresolved conflicts. He looked diminished in the hospital bed, medical equipment, emphasizing his vulnerability. Our conversation began stiffly, both of us uncertain of boundaries. Then, in a moment of unexpected clarity, he asked, "Why could you not simply do as we wished? It would have been easier for everyone." Instead of defending my choices, as I had countless times before, I asked a question in return. "Were you happy in the life your parents chose for you?" His silence contained volumes. After a long pause, he admitted, "I wanted to be an engineer. My father needed me in the family business." This small acknowledgement of his own compromised dreams opened a door previously sealed shut. For the first time, we spoke not as father and rebellious daughter, but as 2 people who had responded differently to cultural expectations. His path had been compliance, mine resistance, but both stemmed from the same pressure. "I cannot apologize for the life I have built," I told him honestly. "But I regret the years of separation and pain for everyone." He nodded slightly, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. "Your grandmother always said you were the strongest of her granddaughters." Perhaps she was right. My father returned home with ongoing health restrictions that forced his retirement. The family business closed permanently, a loss of identity he struggled to accept. Without the daily reinforcement of his traditional business community, isolated by health limitations, he gradually showed subtle shifts in perspective. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during preparations for my wedding. The ceremony would blend traditional elements with contemporary values, honoring heritage without sacrificing autonomy. My mother had become increasingly involved in planning, while my father maintained distance until the question of who would walk me down the aisle arose. My mother raised the subject during a family dinner, the first my father had attended since our reconciliation began. "In American weddings, the father walks the bride down the aisle," she noted. "It is an important tradition." My father looked up from his plate, expression unreadable. "I disowned her. I have no right to claim that honor now." The painful honesty of his statement hung in the air. After a moment's consideration, I responded, "The past cannot be undone, but perhaps we can create a new tradition that honors where we are now, not where we were." The solution emerged organically. I would walk halfway down the aisle alone, symbolizing my independent journey, then be met by both parents to complete the path together, representing reconciliation and respect for both my autonomy and our shared heritage. My father's acceptance of this compromise represented the most significant shift in our relationship. Not full embrace of my choices, but acknowledgement of my right to make them, and recognition of his own role in our estrangement. The wedding day arrived on a perfect autumn Saturday. The venue overlooked Lake Michigan's sunshine glinting off the water as guests gathered. Thomas waited at the altar, his family filling several rows. My side contained fewer relatives, but many chosen family members: Jessica, as maid of honor; Linda, from my early career, former roommates, therapy group friends who had supported my journey. As the music began, I stood alone at the entrance, remembering the frightened young woman who had driven away from home with everything she owned packed in a used Honda. The path forward had contained both profound pain and unexpected joy, loss and discovery, rejection and newfound connection. Halfway down the aisle, my parents waited. My mother's eyes shone with tears, my father standing formally in his best suit. When I reached them, he offered his arm with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I was wrong," he said quietly, words meant only for me. Not about everything, but about what matters most. It was not a complete transformation or perfect reconciliation. Cultural differences and past hurts would always shape our relationship. But in that moment of honest acknowledgement, we found a path forward based on mutual respect rather than dominance and submission. The reception celebrated both traditions with classical music alongside Bollywood hits, American wedding cake beside traditional Indian sweets. My father surprised everyone by offering a toast that acknowledged both his traditional values and his daughter's right to define her own path. "In our culture, we believe family is everything," he said, voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. "What I've learned painfully and late is that family must be built on respect, not just obligation. My daughter taught me this difficult lesson through her courage." The Wilson Taylor Educational Fund flourished in the years that followed, supporting dozens of young women navigating the complex intersection of traditional expectations and personal aspirations. My mother became its most passionate advocate, finding purpose in helping others avoid the silence she had maintained for too long. My business continued to grow, expanding internationally, with offices in London and Singapore. Diane completed law school and joined our legal team, bringing unique perspective to our work with women entrepreneurs. Sophia's son, Arjun, became a regular visitor to our home, curious about his aunt's business and the technology that fascinated him. The relationship with my father remained complicated, moments of connection, interspersed with old patterns that emerged in times of stress. We learned to accept these limitations, to appreciate progress without expecting perfection. The cultural and generational gaps could never be completely bridged, but we found ways to meet in the middle ground of mutual respect. Looking back on my journey from rejected daughter to empowered woman, I recognize that true worth never comes from external validation, whether from family, culture, or society. It emerges from honoring your authentic self while finding compassion for those whose limitations prevent them from seeing your full value. The tables turned not through revenge or rejection, but through creating success on my own terms, while leaving space for reconciliation when genuine change became possible. If my story resonates with you, I hope you will take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced cultural expectations that conflicted with your personal dreams? How did you navigate that difficult terrain? Please subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation, and share this video with someone who might need to know they are not alone in their struggle. Remember that your worth is inherent, not determined by others' approval. Thank you for listening to my journey. and may you find the courage to honor your authentic self, whatever path that requires.